Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mikey Aaronworth, signing on to the sign-off of Frameworth podcast for yet another week, and I am joined, as always, by my trusty sidekick, Brian Aaronworth. We'll do this little preamble a little bit before. President of Frameworth, and we're joined by a special guest. Played junior for the London Knights until he was drafted 21st overall by the California Golden Seals in 1975, where he broke the record for shorthanded goals in a rookie season with 5. Well known not just for a fantastic career, but in particular for a 60-goal season with the Washington Capitals in 1982, when he set the still-standing Washington Capitals season record for points at 136. We're joined by the one and only Dennis Maruk. Thank you so much for joining us, Dennis. How are you doing today?
It's great to be here. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us. So as we always do on this podcast, one of the things that we like to talk about, apart from just what goes on the rink and in the arenas, is talk about the business of sports, which happens behind the scenes. Dennis, I know one thing that we do have in common. We had earlier on this podcast, Ken Reed, host on Sportsnet, also a writer in his own right, who he had collaborated with us, apart from the podcast, to do the biography for Eddie Shack, a man I'm sure you're familiar with there. You also wrote a book with Ken Reed. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Ken was my partner, yes.
And how was that process? We're going to, not that we need to get any dirt on Ken Reed necessarily, but, a great guy to work with, friend of the podcast and friend of Frameworth's as well. Why don't you explain that experience you had a little bit?
Oh, I met with one fellow, not Ken at the time, and he said we start talking about stories about my career and post career, all that kind of stuff. And he said, you got to talk to this other guy, Ken Reed. He writes books, and you guys should team up. So Ken and I played in a golf event, and then a few days later we sat down and chatted. And I thought it was just for a nice little lunch, but it ended up being about 4 to 5 hour lunch break where I was just going on and on and on about stories. And he said, "Yeah, you should write a book." I go, "Well, I'm not really ready to write a book right now. I've still got a lot more things in my life to do." So I, went home, and then we teamed up again, and I thought about it, and I said, "Well, okay, Ken, let's do it. I'm going to write some stuff. You're going to write. We're going to go over it, see what's right, what's wrong, and then we'll put it together. But this is how I want it done." I read a lot of James Patterson books.
Okay.
The author, great author. Yeah. And all short chapters. It's nice. It's easy to read, and you always want to read on. I said, well, I'm 60 years old. I scored 60 goals, and I want 60 chapters.
Hey, there you go. I like that.
60 short chapters. And that's how and he said, that's a great idea. So we started off, and my book is not, where you read it, the first chapter is not about, I grew up 8 years old playing hockey in Rexdale, Ontario, playing house league. I started off on being a cruise ship, going out to the Gulf there for the oil rig. That's where I was working.
That's an interesting way to start things out there.
Changed the stories a lot.
That's amazing. And what was your favorite part about writing that book? I mean, obviously, you have a lot of people out there who are interested in how, someone who's working on a ship on the oil rig ends up scoring 60 goals for the Washington Capitals. Why don't you walk us through that process a little bit? What happened in your life that got you finally focused on hockey and shifted that feeling of your life?
Well, a pretty successful hockey career. I played with some teams that were not real strong, and I never won a Stanley Cup. I went to the semifinals, so I thought there were some good things about dealing with adversity. I was told at junior even that I was too small to play in junior, too small to play in the NHL, and that I wasn't going to make it. So I had to deal with that for a long time. So I just kept pushing myself and tried to play in the big man's game. I got drafted by California. I had some 3 great years in junior, first. And then I won Rookie of the Year, and then I also won Most Valuable Player in the OHL. So I had some pretty good credentials, scoring, points, everything was good. And then, I thought I was a first rounder. And I got first picked in the second round, and I know the reason was because of my size. And
right.
California Golden Seals took me, and I ended up scoring 30 goals my first year at a buck. I was 158 pounds. So I was kind of beat up a little bit. But
were you always a goal scorer? Wait, was goal scoring always your prowess? I mean, we talked to a lot of players on this podcast who Wendell Clark, Doug Gilmour, who kind of had to change their game quite a bit once they got into the league. Doug Gilmour famously, they said, if you can check, if you can play. And he had to go from a goal scorer to more of a checker. When you finally entered into the pros, was there anything about your game that had to change accordingly?
I don't know if you read the book, but definitely after my junior, when I got drafted, I had a golf tournament. I was sitting with Dave Hutchison, great man, played in Chicago, Toronto, and all that. And we're sitting there, and I said, Hutch, I says, you played a year, 2 years in NHL. What do you got to do to, you know, to survive and all that kind of stuff? And the funniest thing to me, I said, Denny, you can score goals, you can make plays, you can do all that kind of stuff, but you got to be a prick. And I went, well, what do you mean? In which way? He says, you got to hit guys. You got to, no matter who they are, you got to get yourself some space. If you got to fight, you got to fight. If you got to spear, you got to spear. If you got to crash check, you got to do all that. That was all part of the game at that time, right? And I go, well, okay. But he said, you still got to do your job. You still got to make plays. You still got to score goals. But you got to create a different outlook of who you are. So that's what I did when I went to training camp. That's exactly what I did. And they still didn't offer me a contract. And so I had an exhibition game against Los Angeles Kings. And I had scored a couple goals, and I was the first star. And I played against Marcel a lot that game. And the GM tapped me on the shoulder and said, call your agent, which was at that time Boom Boom Jeffrey on, and tell him to come. We're going to sign a contract when you get back to Oakland. So that's why I had to just keep proving, yeah.
Well, you mentioned actually, Oakland and kind of the path that your career took. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, a lot of what we like to focus on here is the overall business of sports. And your career was very much coming to fruition at the time that the league was kind of in flux between the NHL, the WHA. You were also drafted by the Cleveland Crusaders in 1975 as well, right? What was your decision to go for the Golden Seals over another league?
Well, every Toronto boy or anybody wants to play in the National Hockey League. And
right.
It was kind of a cute little story I got with that because I played lacrosse and I was a goalie in lacrosse. And I was really going to play for the Montreal pro team in lacrosse, a goalie. And because I didn't know anything about what was going to happen with the NHL or where I was going to get drafted. And I really enjoyed lacrosse. I was a goalie. Had a lot of fun with it.
Wow.
But I ended up
not going to get 60 goals a season playing goalie, but, maybe you'll let in 60 goals. Who knows?
I did score a bunch of goals as a goalie because there was no
really?
offsides. I just delayed penalty, run down, stand in front of their net, and they pass it to me, and I try and score.
That's amazing. I love that.
It's kind of interesting, but yeah, that's the way it was. And the Crusaders was world hockey, and my dream was to play as a kid growing up watching Toronto Maple Leafs hockey night in Canada and all that. I wanted to play in the NHL. That was my path. That's where I wanted to go. And I got drafted by a team that was not real strong, so I was able to make the team the first year. And I think that's where, if I'd have been drafted by Montreal or Boston or someone else that are real strong, I might have been in the minors the first year or two. But I'm sure that if I would how I worked and how things went, that I would have probably made it.
Well, let me ask you one question, because so many times I hear this. Players that have been started in lacrosse.
Right.
And John Tavares was great at lacrosse. There's so many players that played lacrosse. Now, it wasn't as much of a mainstream sport with me when I was growing up, and I was kind of in the same age group as you. But we didn't have the opportunity as much. But is there a relationship between playing lacrosse and playing hockey? Like, guys, is it the hands? Is it coordination? Does lacrosse help you specifically in your hockey, you think?
Definitely. I think there's a lot of sports that can help in hockey, but I think lacrosse gave you your one thing was because it was a conditioning sport too. It was excellent. You're running all the time. Your eye puck contact, your read and react, your quickness. It created all that, and that definitely would help. And go down the list of guys that played in the NHL that were lacrosse players, as you mentioned, a few of them.
I think even Wayne played lacrosse.
You go down the list of guys, Brendan Shanahan, all these guys that were great players in NHL, and they go, well, they were great lacrosse players. Adam Oates played with my younger brother, in Toronto for Rexdale Warriors, and he was just smaller than everybody else, but he was one of the best lacrosse players.
Were there any NHL players that you played lacrosse with? Like, who was the best NHL player you've played lacrosse with?
Play lacrosse with.
You can say yourself if you want. If you want to say yourself, you can do so.
No, I was a goalie. There's another guy that played lacrosse, was he's no longer with us, but Jim Petty. I don't know if you remember, Jim Petty was drafted by the Boston Bruins. He was a goalie, and he played out, and he was a real strong player. Stan Jonathan, we played against, he was up in Peterborough, and he was a tough hockey player, but used to seeing him play lacrosse. He was unbelievable. He could really shoot the ball. So he was one guy that I always looked at guys that were shooters now because I had to stop him. I was a goalie. And he, not only was he tough, a little guy, tough playing lacrosse, but boy, he could really shoot that ball. And that was the thing that I noticed a lot of guys is as Brian just mentioned about the connection with the game is, I think it's the speed and the coordination of the hands and timing and all that. Definitely a great game for conditioning.
Right. Love that. Yeah. Now, to go back to the NHL for a little bit, I think one of the most interesting elements of your career, non-stat wise and not to do with the way that you played the game specifically, but I mentioned the word flux earlier, but the financial instability of some of the teams that you were playing with between the years 1976 and 78. I'm curious, as a player, you started with California, as we mentioned. They shifted to the Cleveland Barons in 76 and then merged with the North Stars. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Cleveland Barons. Who are they now? Yeah. The Minnesota North Stars in 78, who retained your rights. During that time, I mean, it was clear that these shifts were happening as a result of some financial instability within the league. The league was trying to help. They allowed for the merger. Did you feel that as a player at all? Did you feel like you were given a little bit of the short end of the stick, so to speak? Maybe not having access to the same sort of amenities, maybe not being able to negotiate similar contracts. What were you thinking going through all that?
Well, as a lad being 19 years old, being drafted, and then making very little money in the juniors a week, but when I signed my first contract with Oakland, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, a 3-year contract, and I got a $30,000 signing bonus. I thought I was a millionaire.
Financial instability need not apply. That
was unbelievable. Look, a 19-year-old kid getting a $30,000 check in 1975. That was pretty impressive.
Not bad.
So, the story was, we always try and give something to our parents, and I asked my parents what they wanted. I figured they wanted a new car. But no, they wanted a pool.
Oh,
so I bought them a pool, and they wanted to do that to have their friends come over socially and play cards, barbecue and sit by go in the water. But my parents never swam. We had to have
They just had it there.
so they would just go in and get wet. They never knew how to swim. So why would they want a pool? Okay, so there you go. But then, Oakland, and then I thought Oakland would have been great the way things were going, and then at the end of the year, we find out that they wanted to build a bigger arena in San Francisco, and the mayor and that they voted against it. So they had to move the team, so they moved it to Cleveland, and we played on Richfield Coliseum, which is kind of the Wizard of Oz building castle. It was in nowhere and 21,000 seats, but hardly anybody came to the game.
Sure.
And so in Cleveland there in 76, 78, we didn't get paid for a month. And players were really getting kind of pissed off and really worried about what's going on here. So then we find out that the team was going to fold. And let's see, that we were going to go on a dispersal draft. So Buffalo was in town, and we both played that night against Buffalo, and after a warm pregame skate, we all went out and had lunch, had a few beers, a few pops, saying our goodbyes because we were going to go on a draft the next day or two. Oh, wow. And we got a phone call 4:30 in the afternoon from Alan Eagleson saying that the league took care of the insurance for you guys. You get your money, and you need to play tonight. Well, wait a minute here. We're half in the bag. What do you mean play the game tonight? There's no way. We got to reschedule it. No, we ended up playing. We lost 6-2, and we ended up getting paid and all that kind of stuff. Finished up the year, and then And then, of course, after the second year, they merged with the Minnesota. So there was no real stability, no structure. So as a young player going in the NHL, I wonder what's going on here. Is this really the NHL? I mean, what is the NHL all about? Why are we, going from city to city? Why can't there be some kind of stability in my life or all the other players going through the same thing? So that was a real struggle and frustration going on in my early careers in the business side of it. And then, of course, when the merge came, that there's so many players in Minnesota. Lou Nanne, the GM, wanted to keep his centerman, and he was looking for a first round pick to pick up a left winger. Well, ended up trading me to Washington Capitals,
Right.
and he got a first round, and that pick was Tom McCarthy. So there you go. And ended up going to Washington and played 5 years there, and then traded back to Minnesota and played 6 more.
You played, I believe it was only 2 games for the North Stars prior to being traded. And I was curious though, because I've always had this fascination with players who get traded. I mean, look, I'm someone who's been far removed from the NHL. I had no chance of making it. House League may not even have taken me. So that's another story. But when I hear about people being traded, I always wonder if you feel like the deal was fair. Like you're going to be comparing yourself with a first round pick as well as the player that's going. What were your thoughts there? What, you hear about the trade. Are you thinking, oh, I'm so much better than that guy? Are you kidding me? Or was there any ill will? Or are you feeling okay about it?
Well, when you traded, you want to be traded in summer, basically, so that you can go to that place and get situated. With the city, whether you're renting a home or buying a home at that time. And, I knew that in the summer that I was going to be traded. He had told me, Lou Nanne had mentioned to me, he says, and then there was no trade. And about a week before camp, he said, come on to Minnesota. The fans are going to love you, blah, blah, blah. Well, I called my lawyer, which was Al Nicholson at the time. And then he said, no, there's 2 teams that are interested in it. Just go rent a house. And so I went to camp, and then that's in the 3 games, I got dressed. The one game, I think I had 1 shift. Harry Howell was the coach, and I asked him after the game, I says, is something going on? He says, yeah. He told me something was going on. Just be patient. I said, okay. And then the next day, we had a home game in Minnesota, and I dressed, hardly played, and all that kind of stuff. So then I got traded. So I had to just deal with that and just move on. I mean, that's what you do. You go to a team that wants you. You leave the team that I guess they don't want you, and try and better their team. So I went to Washington and I had some great seasons there.
Yeah, you did. You absolutely did, and you helped lead them to their first playoff berth as well, I believe. Right? You were on that team. Are there any
that was a top division? Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any specific memories of the playoffs that stick out? You mentioned you made the semifinals. But those playoff runs, I mean, was that just a completely different atmosphere? What was it like playing in Washington at those times? And what was the financial situation compared to the teams that you had played with prior? Did you feel a change when you made that shift?
In Washington, there was we called it was Save the Caps campaign. They were going to fold too.
Oh wow!
They were not getting the attendance at all there, and the late Abe Poland was the owner, and he just said, "This is enough. I got to find out if people really want hockey here in Washington." And I think it just wasn't really educated, as I say, or educated the game of hockey there in DC. And it took a few years. We did save the Caps. They ended up getting more season ticket holders, and he kept the team. And then they started making trades, start making changes. And things are pretty good for me. And even though the team was struggling a little bit, we finally made the playoffs. And then those years that I had 50 goals and 60 goals in the 1982 All-Star game was in Washington, and I was the lone player from the Capitals to perform in there. And of course, I was last one to get introduced, and an outstanding ovation that was better than Gretzky and Messi and all those guys that were playing. And it went on for a couple minutes. And so I was pretty, that's kind of my Stanley Cup that I look back to.
That's
that
amazing.
I never got, was being there, because my parents were able to be there for the whole week. We got lunch at the White House.
Wow.
Got to meet President Reagan during that time. So that was a pretty neat year, 82 in Washington, yeah.
Now, you mentioned your parents and food in the same sentence, which cues me to a question that I want to ask, because you are Canadian-Ukrainian, correct?
You got it.
Pierogies.
100%.
Pierogies, yay or nay?
Put ahead. Put ahead.
My wife is Ukrainian too.
Put ahead, my Ukrainian. That's about all I know. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have some Ukrainian blood in us as well, and we share that affinity towards the pierogies. That's right. A good frozen pierogi.
Cabbage rolls.
Yeah,
Ukrainians make the best cabbage rolls.
we make the best a lot of things when it comes to food. That's for sure. Now, what I want to do kind of is shift a little bit, because you mentioned the 60-goal season and that era of your career being kind of like your Stanley Cup. What was it like? Was there a clear before and after moment when you had hit 60 goals? Because one thing that we do love to talk about here, we had Daryl Sittler on talking about the 10-point night, Doug Gilmour talking about the wraparound goal, and how these moments of legend kind of define a player's career and become sort of the basis by which fans remember you. Once you got that 60-goal season, what changed for you moving forward?
Well, the fact that we were trying to chase that guy that I think had 92 goals that season, 202 points or whatever he had. I think his name was Gretzky.
I've heard of him.
Bossy had 63 and I had 60. I was third. And I had a few games left, 2 or 3 games, and I just couldn't score. I had chances, but I ended up stuck at 60. But, during that whole season and that, my line mates were Chris Valentine and Ryan Walter, and we stayed together the whole year. We're on a power play together, and when you get on a line and you complement each other and things work well, the coach definitely doesn't want to move us around or other than that. And so I owe a lot of credit to those two guys that you can't do it by yourself. And I know Gretzky would probably say the same thing. He had look at the guys that he had in that team scoring all those goals, and what the explosive team they had in the 80s was unbelievable. And here's this little guy from Rexton, Ontario, getting 60 goals and 136 points in the top 10 in the scoring race with all those other guys with Marcel Dion. So, those things were that year, and it was great to be involved with that elite group. And, the year before that, I had 50 goals. So, I had 110 goals. So, I think there's a lot to be said in that with the book that I became a little bit challenged with due to the fact that I think I was in certain cities that didn't get the recognition that a lot of other guys did.
Well, and here's a really interesting point. Well, one, how this one guy, 99, kind of stole the spotlight from a lot of unbelievably great players,
right.
Mike Bossy, and
right.
not stole the spotlight. Everybody stood on their own, but
right.
The focus was because Wayne was just, lighting it up so big.
Right.
But Mike Boss, all those great players, 60 goals. I mean, there's not very many people that have that. And
we have right now in Washington what a lot of people are calling potentially the best pure goal scorer of all time in Alex Ovechkin, and he's he's not touching your points. Like there's so much to be said about the fact that the path that you laid down is something that still to this day they've had a Stanley Cup winning team and they haven't touched that record.
But Dennis was talking about something as well, which is how your career lines up. So you had 60 goals on a team that was a good team. But
right.
Can you imagine? And we talk about this with players like Marcel Dion, like one of the best goal scorers of all time, one of the best players around,
and
too.
Who also wrote the foreword of your book as well.
Right. And Marcel ends up in L.A. If he ends up in Montreal, he's a legend.
Right.
Like, unbelievable. And Marcel was just such a great player. So it's where you end up, who you're playing with. Even Sidney Crosby, 3 Stanley Cups. But can you imagine if he had a guy like Pat Kane on his wing?
Sure.
Like it's somebody that can play up to that level, and feed the puck and give the puck to. So you do it without the supporting cast, say that Wayne did. You had some great players on the team, but Wayne had some every player. Now he made a lot of great players too.
Right.
Was there, looking back, I'm sure it's different now, but as a player in the league, in what a lot of people would probably call Wayne Gretzky's league at that time, was there any resentment towards the fact, maybe not him as a person or a player, but towards the fact that he got so much attention and was put around such talented players? Or was it just a matter of, they're the big bad team that we have to face, and that's just the way that things go?
No, he was a phenomenal player. There's no doubt about it. They did have great players. He had great players to play with them, but that's a compliment to the organization and the Edmonton Oilers to get all those good players and put them on a team. They were the team of the '80s. And
Right.
when I was in Minnesota with the North Stars, I think it was '84 year. We had to play them in the semifinals to go to the finals. And we had four great hockey games. We were beating them 4-1 in the third game in Minnesota, midway through second period. We lost 7-5.
Aish.
That's how much power they had. But we didn't sit on that 4-1. We played great. They just woke up and said,
Yeah.
"Oh, geez, we better do something." That's just the way they were. I think players, you only allowed 20 players on a team, so I think in a player's mind, you always want to win. You get an opportunity to play and a chance for the Stanley Cup. And I think in Minnesota, we had a real strong team there with Cicerelli, Broad, and Hartsburg and all that. Goaltender with Donnie Beaupre and Joe Malash. We had a great group. We just didn't have enough firepower against the Oilers. And
Sure.
I think we had the team that could have beat them. And one game was, real close, 3-1 and 4-2, and it was all. But I mean, you move on as a hockey player. You understand that I think Marcel, look what he did, and he hasn't won a Stanley Cup, and I think that's as you said, putting him in Montreal. Wow, I mean, yeah, look at that. There'd
Totally
be
different
a lot
story.
of Stanley Cups with
you got
Marcel.
that.
So it's just timing. It's what it is, and your dream is to play in the National Hockey League, and you do whatever you can.
Yep.
Hey,
Say
Dennis,
that.
I wanted to touch on this. You had mentioned Al Eagleson, a controversial figure,
Right.
was your agent. How is your relationship now? I've talked to a lot of guys still very close with him. Other guys don't have a good word to say. How is your relationship with him, and how did that?
Well, it goes a long way. When my mom passed away at a young age, and Alan came to the funeral and all that. And my first year, when I signed that contract, there was a slip of paper that was an agreement that through I had a law firm in Montreal, Shaddy, Saisant, and Levine, and in that was if I was to score 30 goals, I'd get a $15,000 check for a bonus. Well, that paper never surfaced anywhere, and at the end of the year, I said to the team, "Well, where's my bonus?" "Well, you don't have a bonus." I went to my agent. Where's the piece of paper? They had no record of it.
Wow.
So either they misplaced it or whatever. So I was kind of frustrated. So I went to Alan Eagleson, which was the NHL player, commissioner, right? So I went and talked to him about it. And he says, "Well, they have no record of it. There's nothing to be done." I said, "Okay." So I ended up having him be my lawyer agent at that time. For my 13 years playing pro, and all he did my contract. He didn't handle my money or anything like that. And
Right.
my relationship with Alan is a friend. What he did was wrong. I still see him periodically. I go up and visit him if I'm up there. He's up in Collingwood there, and we don't talk about what he did. And I think. I'm a friend with him. What he did was wrong, and I know he probably hurt a lot of players the way they feel about him. But did he serve enough time? Did he service? I think he did, and of course he lost his bar license and everything like that. But I still call him my friend. I think he did a lot for the game. And yeah, and I think there's a lot of players that disagree with what I'm saying, and I think there's a lot of players that agree with me. So that's where I am with him right now. Yes.
If the listener's listening and doesn't know what we're talking about, Alan Eagleson, you can look up. He is currently disbarred, a Canadian lawyer. Some controversy there that we don't need to get into. Appreciate you speaking on that. Question though, you had mentioned that he was the executive director for the NHLPA at the point in time when was he also your agent at that time? He was doing both?
No, he became my agent after the first year because of the bonus situation. I just figured.
Yeah.
I thought that when I was my last year junior, and the agents are coming after you, to take you as their representative, And I didn't get any phone calls from Al Nicholson, so I didn't think I was a strong enough, high enough player drafted to be in his group. So I didn't contact him, and he never contacted me. So I ended up going with that Montreal firm that let me down.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now it's you've mentioned a couple times, and just going over these stories, it just feels like this is you are kind of the perfect guest to have on this podcast, because so many of your most interesting stories surround the aura of the NHL in an era when it wasn't the powerhouse that we know it to be, or maybe it was perceived to be, but clearly, with the teams that you played for and some of the controversy that surrounded the league at the time, it wasn't quite as structured and as strong as we believe it to be now. All of these stories, and you brought this up a couple times, are in your book, Dennis Maruk, The Unforgettable Story of Hockey's Forgotten 60-Goal Man. And I want to draw attention to that title, because obviously you chose that title. Explain your thinking behind hockey's forgotten 60-goal man. What is your sentiment behind that?
Well, I think a lot has to do with where I played, the places I played, and the weak teams and the franchises that I didn't get the recognition that other players did get. And I still think at times where I do events and stuff like that, and I'll sit down with the table, and there's only been 20 players ever to score 60 goals in the National Hockey League, and I'm one of them. But there's two guys that a lot of people, when they sit around and do a little question and answer period, and I ask them, and the two guys that they don't find out who scored 60 goals more was myself and Bernie Nichols. Bernie Nichols had 75, I think, one year, and that was the most he ever had. But when you go down the list, people get all the other guys, but they don't get us.
That's fascinating.
The Burries, the Gretzky's, Lemieux, go down the list, the Lions, Burry, all that. So that's part of it. And I just think the whole thing was that, I had 136 points, and people call me a goal scorer, but I had 76 assists that year.
Yeah.
And I had over 500 assists as a pro hockey player. I was more of a playmaker as well, but I knew how to score. I knew in situation, but I consider myself more as a playmaker and all that. So, and like Ovechkin, I go to DC and all that kind of stuff and watch a few games, and I meet them, and he just says, "Don't worry, I'm not going to break that record. That's yours."
You know what?
There's no way I'm going to get 76 assists, and there's no way I'm going to get 136 points.
Yeah.
So it says I beat you in the goals, but
I love that.
Other than that, the record's going to be yours.
Is
Washington? What's that?
Is Washington the team that you kind of root for now, or you root somewhere else now?
I always root for Toronto Maple Leafs and the Washington Capitals.
Awesome.
Yes. Mainly the Washington Capitals. Growing up as a kid, I've always wanted to play. I tried to get traded to Toronto.
Yeah.
And Lou Nanny wouldn't trade me because we were still in the Chuck Norris division. Norris, we called it the
Chuck Norris division. I love that.
But Wendell, Wendell, he'll say the same thing. But that's what it was, and he would never trade me there.
Well, you know what? I'm thinking too, in this, it's all timing and eras, and a lot of the guys that could make more money signing autographs than the great players did back in the day.
Right.
But if you were playing in this era with the TV broadcasts, and it's a lot more global, and people would have known you better. But even today, we have great players on the West Coast.
Right.
And from our point of view in the autograph business, the memorabilia business,
right.
If you're on an East Coast team, Toronto, Montreal especially, New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh, you're on the highlight reels more often because you make the 11 o'clock news.
Right.
All that stuff affects your ability to hit the newsreels, and that is affecting your popularity, et cetera. Guys like Kopitar out in the West Coast.
Sure. We don't see it quite as much.
No, you don't see that.
Exactly.
Was your decision to finally write the book or be involved in the release of the book, was that your attempt to set the record straight? Was it your attempt to kind of solidify your legacy, or was it more just to tell the story of your life because it's interesting as it is? Like, was there any sense of I'm putting this out there because people need to know there were players other than the superstars in the era that I played the game?
Well, I think there's a combination of issues, as you say. Definitely, of course, my career and my post career and things that I had a real hard time dealing with post careers and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of players that going through in my era have gone through the same way. Could they have written a book as well? Yeah, that wasn't the reason why I wrote the book. I just thought I had some positives and I had some negatives that'd be nice for people to hear about. That the NHL is not always all peaches and cream. There's some negatives to go along with it, and a lot of people don't hear or see those negatives that go along and what it does to professional athletes as a person and all that. So I wanted to put in all those areas in the book so that let people know that it's not the greatest thing to be a professional athlete.
Did you get any backlash from the league for some of the things that you did? Was there anyone who reached out to you and kind of said, hey, like, you know?
It's kind of funny you ask that question, because the only negative thing that I got from anybody, not from the league, is for one of the reviews that I got from somebody said it sounded like I was just complaining about how the league was, and
really,
I was dissatisfied and all that. Other than that, people say, "Hey, it's a great read. We liked how you wrote the book. How you liked the short chapters. We liked how you went from." It's not an autobiography where you start out playing hockey. I like how you started, I like how you twist and turn on your career, and also the fact that I tried to take my life one night, and so all those things were in there, and how I got out of it, and things like that. So it was a life story too as well, but it's also something that people needed to hear.
I want to touch on the post career a little bit, because the NHL Alumni has come a long way in helping players and doing some work through the years. And I've had a long relationship with the NHL Alumni going back to, when Rene Robert was running the Alumni.
Right.
And it's become a lot more professional now, but obviously there's still more work to be done. And there are a lot of players that have issues coming out of the NHL. Some players have passed away down and out, or don't have money. And it's important, I think, for the NHL and the NHL Alumni to look after their own. There's obviously no worries about Wayne Gretzky and some of the other guys. I mean, you're making, I don't know, in your career too, I mean, you can make a little bit of a living doing autograph shows and public appearances because of your notoriety, largely because of your 60-goal season.
Right.
But a lot of players didn't have that. Chico Mackey was one of those guys, or I think there was a few guys that had big issues. So, in some ways, you could have been looked after better by the Alumni, but there's other players that need more help.
Well, they're growing. It looks as though the Alumni is making good strides to support players post retirement, and I think you'll probably agree with this, that one of the reasons is players like you are speaking out. It's important to do so. Now, the negative element of it, from your perspective, is that people hear you say these things, and some of them believe you're complaining, which is absurd, because you're a human being that was put through a lot. The idea of spending your whole life playing hockey, retiring, and then being kind of, especially, being the thing that's making these teams money and keeping them afloat in times when they're, like you said, about to fold, and then the league kind of ignores you. That's not complaining. That's drawing attention to a major issue. It was the concussions of that era. And do you you mentioned hearing people saying that it sounded like you were complaining. What about the flip side? Do you have people coming to you and saying, maybe other players, thanks for sharing your story, because it was something that maybe I wasn't willing to share, and your bravery in sharing it helped me come out with my issues?
Yeah, definitely. But you think back to, we didn't make a lot of money. I think my last few years I made $300,000. I don't mind saying it, and I think Gretzky made at that time was $800,000. That was the most in the league. So we didn't make a lot of money. So it was a lot was my fault that did not start or get really ready for a post career. We always thought we could play till 20 years or whatever. I ended up playing 14, but and I take the blame personally that I didn't. But we were told during that time that we were going to be taken care of. We're a professional athlete. you have no problem getting a job when you're done, whether you're in business or whatever, you won't have any problem. Well, my little door was, you see my hand there, was one of those little things there. You can barely see through my fingers.
Yeah.
So I had no, so I had to struggle. I struggled many, many years. But when I moved back to Toronto, the NHL Alumni has really, really helped me out financially and all that. If it wasn't for them and family, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. So I owe a lot to the NHL Alumni, what they did and what they're doing now. The players today make so much money. They don't need the NHL Alumni. They don't need to do all those things. And we as athletes that are played during our time, it's nice to get a few dollars and do an event, do a signing, or do a golf tournament, or go play, do some charity Easter Seals games and stuff, and make a few dollars. It's really nice because we would have never seen that kind of money during our time.
Well, in recent years, though, we've got guys like Heels is running it, Glenn Healy, and he's gone a long way. He signed us up as a licensee for the alumni, and we contribute through royalties for the products that we're creating. Wayne Gretzky signed over some of his rights so that a lot of those dollars. Let's face it. Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux and your top 5 of all time kind of guys, they drive a lot of business for the alumni, and so if they can contribute a little piece of what they get to the alumni, that helps the cause.
Right.
So it's come a long way. There's a lot more they have to do.
I mean, it's so apparent hearing you talk about what you've gone through and how you've come out on the other side with some assistance from the alumni. The book goes into much more detail about this, and the reason we keep bringing it up is if you're getting anything, you as the listener, out of listening to this conversation, absolutely check it out. It's available now on Amazon. Once again, Dennis Maruk, The Unforgettable Story of Hockey's Forgotten 60-Goal Man. These stories and more. Is there one specific story that you might want to use that is kind of a teaser? It doesn't have to be too dramatic. Maybe it is, but something that would say, hey, if you like this kind of story, there's a lot more of this in it. Is there an example you can give us?
Oh, well, I mean, how much time you got?
Why don't you just read us the book verbatim?
No, I think that, thank you very much for having me on the show. And I think really that in today's world as a hockey player, I've got grandsons that play. I just came back from Las Vegas. I have a 9-year-old trip. He plays for AAA Minnesota Blades, 2012, and they won the tournament. And it's really hard for players to make it to the NHL today.
Oh, yeah.
It's so hard, and parents put so much time and money and everything. I really think that these children should not just stick to one sport.
Okay.
They should keep playing other sports, individual sports, tennis, golf, things like that, baseball, whenever they can. I know it's tough on the parents, but we did it when we were younger and all that, and I think they should do it more today. There's too much emphasis on, I got to get extra trainers, I got to get extra this, my kid's going to be the next Gretzky, my kid's going to be, let the child have fun with the game.
Definitely.
Whatever happens.
Wayne feels the exact same way. He said it many, many times. So that's interesting that a lot of guys say that. Wayne says way too much time on the ice. Take the summer and play some baseball. Take some other things. You don't. If you're good and you're focused and you're motivated, that's more than anything. You can be a talented player, but if you don't have the desire and keep the desire as you get through your teenage years and the girls come into play and all sorts of other distractions.
Everything.
Yeah, you've got to be.
How often is it that a player makes it to whatever they think that next tier is going to be, whether it's university or something, and then their perspective shifts? They find another passion in life, whether it's finding partners or it's another sport or it's partying. That's liable to happen at any point, and it's more likely if they only view hockey as a job rather than something that they thoroughly enjoy. So that's all good advice.
Hey, Dennis, on a lighter note, I wanted to touch base with a couple of shout outs to some mutual friends. First time I met you, Ron Bastien, Baz, brought you into the office, and we sat in my office and we started talking about memorabilia and all that. He was here just the other day, but he lives in Florida most of the year. Have you seen him lately?
No, I just talked to him a few times on the phone. That's it. Yeah.
And then the other guy that I'm really looking forward to get back to after COVID, because I haven't seen him in a year and a half, and I know he's a good mutual friend, is Mike McKenzie. We spent many times up in his private box watching hockey games up there, drinking a little Amarone.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike's the big M. Yeah, you know him longer than I have. I met him through an event down in Florida.
Because he works with the Snowbirds, I believe, right?
Yeah, works for Snowbirds, right? The Snowbird guys, yeah. But he's been pretty sick off and on. We were supposed to meet up with him a few weeks ago or something, and he got sick, and I was down in Toronto and at the Intercontinental there, and we were supposed to team up, and he said, no, we'll have to change it, but I'm sure I'll run into him soon. There's no doubt about it. He's a great man, as you know, and likes to have a good time, but just a great man.
Well, mutual friends with all of us, because we had John McDermott on the show show a few weeks back, and of course he was the first one to introduce me to Mike, because we talked about walking from the Platinum Lounge all the way up through without a ticket into the private box. And
we'll as the podcast continues, this motley crew of names, people will recognize them more and more. They get caught up almost as characters. Brad Jansen is one of them now that everyone we have on mentions him at some point. We're running a little low on time. I want to get just briefly spend a couple minutes on your perspective on the memorabilia industry in general. Now, my dad had mentioned earlier that your opportunities for signings and the products that you're going to sign are often likely going to have inscriptions of 60 goals. They're going to revolve around that 60-goal season. As you mentioned, I believe it was, 20 other players or there are only 20 players who had gotten 60 goals. What does that mean to you? Like, what does memorabilia mean to you? When you were growing up, did you have an affinity towards autographs and signed product? And how do you think the industry has shifted maybe around you, given that you've had these accomplishments in your career?
Well, it certainly has helped in a pocketbook a little bit for me, and I've always remember Wayne Gretzky saying, "Make sure when you sign your name that people can read it."
Yes, very important.
It comes up all the time.
And especially read the guy's signatures today, you can barely make it out.
Yeah,
who it is, unless you know and you took a picture of it and you remind yourself that's that person. But that's what I did, and I thank Brian for doing a lot of things for me throughout the years at Frameworth there, because I didn't make a lot of money, and I've had some pretty good seasons in the hockey, and I'm in that elite group of 60. It'd be kind of nice to have an event where all the 60 goal scorers get together.
There's an idea.
I think that'd be kind of a neat event. Even not that I'm into it or do it with all the 50 plus 50 goal scorers up to Mr. Gretzky, 92, I think it'd be kind of nice to have a event or golf event that would sell out in no time.
It feels like it, and be a great event for the alumni as well. I mean, for people who are listening, one thing that us as people who are in the industry, we talk about this as though it's common knowledge, but it isn't quite. When we talk about the alumni helping people out, a lot of it has to do with putting on these events where the players who take part will make money off of it, but there's also, as my dad mentioned, the royalties, which is an essentially almost like a pooled fund for the alumni that can be distributed and dispersed among its members. So by all the 60 goal scorers getting together for an event, that benefits everyone in the alumni in some capacity by strengthening what the alumni's power is and by actually putting dollars in their pockets. So all these things are kind of incumbent or encapsulate what it is that we like to talk about, which is the business of sports around the game that was played. Anything that you're working on apart from that? What do you do these days as the alumni? Have you up to no good representing them, or what are you doing there?
Well, with that wonderful COVID-19, so we're a lot of events were canceled or put on hold. And I think things are starting to come up now. I got a few golf events coming up. Also got to get ready. I got engaged 3 times a charm. I'm getting married New Year's Eve.
There you go. Congratulations.
In London, Ontario. So I live here in London, and Amelia's been just great. She works with Western University, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful person. So we're it's our third time, so that's it.
There you go.
3 times the charm, right?
Perfect.
Other than that, I've worked recently with the ice rinks. A boy that his name is Jaden Myers. Was drafted by Peterborough Pete's. He's 16, and I've been on the ice a couple times with them. It sounds like he might want me to be his little mentor and help him
cool.
out and
Cool.
and all that. So I like doing things like that. And I used to work up at Huntsville at a hockey school, and I just found out that they're opening up, and then they want me to come back up there in August to do work with the kids down there. I enjoy working with the kids, and I work on shooting a lot with them.
Awesome.
Nice.
That's
Yeah.
great. Well, we're getting low here, but we do appreciate the time that you spent with us. Before we go, Dad, anything else to say?
No,
Any
I
other
just
questions?
appreciate Dennis coming on. We've known each other for quite some time, and hopefully when things open up a little bit, Dennis, we're going to get you back in here. We'll do some signings.
Absolutely.
We have the Toronto Sports Card Show coming up. We're not as involved in terms of the autograph signing booths as we used to be, but I know we had you there once.
Yeah.
So if we can, try and do, we've had some great events here in the Frameworth showroom where we've had Wayne Gretzky, and I think you came in a few, Mario Lemieux and Bobby Orr have all appeared here. So hopefully we can get that back up and running. But in the meantime, thank you, Dennis, for spending the time with us. We really appreciate it.
Fascinating stories all around. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. Anytime. And great, Brian. Thanks for what you're doing. That's awesome. Thank
Perfect.
you.
So
Anytime.
one last time, guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, absolutely go out and find a copy of Dennis Maruk, The Unforgettable Story of Hockey's Forgotten 60-Goal Man. Came out in 2017, but it's not going stale and it's not going anywhere. So get your copy now. Dennis, thank you once again for joining us. As always, Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth, and myself, Mikey Aaronworth, host of the Sign Off Podcast. And this is us signing off. Great.
That was great, Dennis.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram at Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadu Productions and Sad Styles Productions. Executive producers Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth signing off.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it.